Hey, everybody, welcome to Locked In. We're going to jump into this new college football season by giving a quick preview of the Georgia Clemson game that's going to be kicking off this year, maybe an hour and a half, and we're pretty close to game time. Um, this is always one of my favorites. I don't necessarily, have, I guess you could say, a dog in the fight, but these are two teams that I always appreciate, always have, and I think most college football fans are in the same boat as me. Um, that this is just a good one to watch. And this year I think the circumstances of college football as a whole have led this one to be like a really interesting game to see, because I think not only do we have two traditional national powers, Southern powers, that are going to be going at it, but I think that the game's going to be made really interesting with Carson Beck, because he's obviously a Heisman front runner. I think the game's also going to be made really, really interesting by Dabo Sweeney's stance on the transfer portal and NIL. I think that I think this game has the potential to really backfire for him. I mean, be a tough day. I'd like to see him, come out looking good. But the thing I wonder about Chance is this has the potential to get completely sideways if, say, Clemson loses this game by say maybe more than 12 points. What do you think?
See, I think we looked at Oregon, Georgia last year, and we saw the game go by the battle of the line. Oregon's line just could not compete, and Georgia did whatever they want. Once Oregon, had to stick 7, 8 guys in the box every play to either get a pass rush or to, not even stop the run, but kind of peg it in the leg a little bit, average it down to 4 yards a rush, which is still good. Then Georgia really got to open up the playbook and open up the field with Carson Beck. So I think you kind of see the same thing with Clemson this year. I think that their D line is the most important factor in this game. And if they don't get a pass rush and if they can't stop the run and they have to start loading up the box, Carson Beck will have a Heisman performance day to day, and that will lead to a score being very lopsided. And, Dabo's job could possibly be on the line, especially with their whole recruiting stance and transfer portal stance, because people in Clemson have money and they have that money that they want to use, and if Dabo don't want to use it, they might be looking for a different perspective, in the coach in front of things.
Yeah, and one of the things that I wonder, like even going back, I remember when we first watched we were watching the Clemson spring game. One of the things that stood out, just like a sore thumb, was how good that Sammy Brown looked in that game. And Sammy Brown, is kind of down in our neck of the woods, went to Jefferson High School in Jefferson, Georgia, just outside of Athens. Kind of a surprise, that he didn't wind up, with the Bulldogs. But the thing that I wonder is if this game were to go badly for Clemson, I wonder if the first argument that's going to happen, because that like that Georgia and Clemson are both after the top recruits. Um, what happens whenever a Georgia recruiter is able to make not just one argument and saying, "Hey, that Dabo is not, into the NIL, not into the transfers. He's not doing the things that have led a lot of other teams succeed, quite highly." But then on top of that, we just thumped them. Do you really want to go there? And I mean, that's not. I'm not saying that to paint them like in the worst light possible, but I think that that's two strong arguments, against Clemson if this game doesn't go, their way, or at least isn't really respectable.
Yeah, I think you got a big understanding of how this game will go last year in the bowl games when Tennessee played Clemson, because Tennessee, or a few years ago, not last year, but um, Clemson basically just couldn't stop the pass, and it was just one of those things. They had to load the box, and their DBs just couldn't keep up with them for 4, 5, 6 seconds at a time. And I just think that's going to be the biggest factor, like how we saw Georgia Tech last year, and roll over. You can see progression in teams from years before. I think you can just see Clemson deteriorating on a scale that you don't really see in college football nowadays, because teams buy players, they buy teams. Clemson's not doing that, and I think their roster is deteriorating. They're only going to be worse than they were last year. And I mean, they lost Will Shipley, who was probably their biggest contributor. I mean, they have Phil Maffa back, but I think Clemson's biggest thing is, they might have to find a few key contributors that aren't necessarily starters right now, and aren't like highly touted names. They might have to dig deep into the Sammy Browns on their roster, which, might be better for them. But, with Dabo's risk factor, I don't know if he does it or not.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time, and I think that what's happening is that there's a it's if you pan back from it, it seems like that there's a big experiment being worked, to see if we can do it, the traditional way, and that's okay. But I think that the problem is whenever the experiment becomes like stubbornness, on a point. Like I mean that that at some point you have to wonder, uh, is it worth it to dig in to the extent that he appears to be dug in? Because I mean, by all accounts, he's a great guy. He's obviously a great coach. But I just like what I wonder is if this isn't like a point where that you're going to get passed by, and it really looks like that from the outside. Like I said, I mean, I'm neither for nor against Clemson, in terms of fandom, but it just seems like that they're at the place where they're it's like I mean it's something silly that I think is but it's similar. Is I remember what was it back in the early 2000s, everybody was buying like the handheld GPS. Those dudes went out of business real quick because the next thing you know, everybody had GPS navigation on their phone, in their car. And, unless you were in that game, your business just probably fell straight through. And that's what I wonder is, I mean, I think that Clemson, I think they're going to have a lot of questions to ask, after this game. And I think that, with that being said, that's not to just write them off. I think that even if Clemson won, I still think that they have the same questions because all that it's going to do is push them off, like a little further back on the horizon instead of making them like something like we must do something with this today. So, I mean, in that sense, it's going to be really interesting. And and like you said, I wish I'd not thought about that at all. It's a good thought that you brought out about the Orange Bowl with Clemson and Tennessee a few years ago. Now the thing with that, and with all due respect, Joe Milton hurt them. And I know that Joe Milton had some supporters, but I'm telling you, ain't
Some
nobody at Tennessee
delusionalist.
sad that they've got a different quarterback. And and good luck to him, in all of his endeavors, because that's how I always am with everybody. I'm saying, good luck to them. I hope they they accomplish everything that they set out to. But they absolutely killed Clemson with the slant. And what got me throughout that game was I thought, why don't you just scoot them up? Why are you giving them cushion like that? And I mean, and on top of that, and I mean, and people who watch this know, I mean, I keep up with Tennessee. I guess I consider myself, a fan of them. Having gone there and whatnot. Um, those receivers weren't. I mean, they weren't world beaters. I mean, they were solid guys, but they weren't. I don't think most of those guys, that, excuse me, that hurt Clemson that year. I don't think most of them are household names. If you're not following Tennessee football, I don't think you know who they are. It's like I think if you go, to Oklahoma, I don't think they can tell you who Squirrel White is. I just don't. And I don't think I'm wrong in saying that. And he was a solid player for Tennessee, but they really made Clemson's defense look bad. And so the question then becomes, what is your answer there? Will the same kind of thing happen? Because, like you said, if it comes to and Georgia is going to be able to run the football. I mean that's they always run it well. Some years better than others, and that's something we've talked about, in previous, episodes here.
And Trevor
But
Etienne is out of the game officially. He's not playing week one.
so he's not playing at all, and but I mean, I'm always one who's of the mind that I mean they just grow on trees in
That
Georgia.
depth,
I
yeah.
mean, it's like Georgia and Alabama. They have always got fine running backs. Like everywhere you go, I mean, it's always been that case. So I mean, I think that still yet, even if you don't have the star power of of ETN, they're probably still going to be able to produce yards rushing. And if they're able to produce enough, it's like you said, Clemson is going to have to commit somebody to the front to try to stop the run. And when they do that, well, I tell you, Beck, in my opinion, Beck is a lot better quarterback than a lot of people give him credit for. I think he's quite good, and I think he's going to have a heck of a year, and it's probably going to start today. So with that being said, we talked a lot. We've just said that Beck clearly, is a focal point. ETN's out, but to me, I keep going back and dwelling on this. Something's got to happen for Clemson, and so I think to me, and you said it before we even started recording. Somebody or multiple somebodies in Clemson's defensive front, they're really going to have to step up today and allow them to play a less, I guess, play less aggressively against the run to try to control the pass threat with Carson Beck. Do you not think that's pretty much maybe the most important point of the game?
Yeah, I think looking at the keys of the game, Georgia's had a hurt defensive line throughout fall, and their DBs have been questionable. Who's going to play and who's going to start where? So I think key points for Clemson this week, find a way to get some pressure and to stop the run without bringing more than 4 or 5 people in the box at any given moment, and to run the football and to run it at an average over 4 yards a carry. If they can do those two things, it's really going to help them. Because the pass is maybe something that'll open up if you can test a few of them DBs that have been questionable all year. Um, for Georgia, you know, it's basically the same thing. They have to find their running game and they have to find it early. And on defense, they really need to stop the pass more than anything. Like I just talked about with them DBs being all question marks in that backfield. They really got to find their guys and find them early, whether it be KJ Bolden, whether it be Dalen Everett, whether it be Daniel Jones. There's or David Daniel. I mean, there's a few people that Janelle Aguero even so that can start there. They just have to find who they want there. And they found it with Malachi Starks early against Oregon last year, with his big interception. So I mean, you got to come out, find who's going to play is in your defensive backfield, and find out how to stop that pass and control the game on offense by running the ball. And that's how Georgia wins. And I've already mentioned how Clemson wins. We'll just see who can actually play up to the standard and who can win the coaching battle today.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I think that one of the things that we haven't mentioned is Clemson's offense. They're going to have to deliver. They really are. And my thought is that the worst thing that can happen to them, I think, is if they score under 30 points. I think
Yeah.
if Clemson can't score 30 points, there's no way they win this football game. There's just no way in my mind. And I may be wrong, but I just think that's the case. I don't think they can go in there like they did against South Carolina last year and have like one of these like 17-7 or maybe even 2017 games with Georgia. They're going to have to produce points. And one of the things that always strikes me when I watch them is I just I'm not sold on Klubnik, and I know that a lot of people
No.
try to be sold on him. I'm not. I think that he can help you out, but I also think he's inconsistent. And I think because he's inconsistent at times, he makes that whole offense inconsistent. And this is a game, I think when you just look back and think of Clemson's schedule, the one thing that was like I think the first domino that fell in this whole what are we going to do about Clemson, what are we going to do about Dabo's position. You go back to the first game last year, whenever they got just hammered by Duke. And I think that, I mean, okay, they had played, correct me if I'm wrong. Klubnik had taken, he was a quarterback. I remember watching him in the Orange Bowl, and then you probably remember me saying, "It's like, this guy don't look bad." He was young, and he did some good things in that game. And I'm thinking, okay, well, but maybe they're gonna reload. Then you come out and you lay the biggest egg in the world against Duke. And now, with respect to Duke, they had a heck of a defense. They were set up well. It's one of the better defenses that I've seen, especially to come from a place that you just don't expect it. They were good to watch. They made teams turn the ball over. And I got a kick out of watching them. Whenever they had that, had the good run there. But I just don't know. I don't find Klubnik to be like the consistent guy that they're going to need. And I think that if he's not today, this one is going to have where the Duke started a lot of rumblings last year. I think this one's going to start a lot of shouting and screaming because this is one of those. Like, I mean, I think Clemson's clear underdog, but I think that their supporters, they want them to compete and they expect them to win. And if they don't, I just don't think this is going to be a pretty season for Clemson. I mean, you can still come back, and I mean, I think the ACC is definitely a conference they can compete in. But to me, and that's something, that was kind of I guess one of the themes that we harped about a lot last year. I don't know if Clemson can, I don't know if they can beat Georgia Tech. I
Not
don't know if a
this
lot of
year, I
people in the
don't
ACC
think.
can beat Georgia Tech, and I mean, and I think that people, like, I remember last year, all the way back to whenever one of the first episodes we had was we just point blank said, you better put your money on Georgia Tech in that bowl game because they're going to beat Central Florida, and it didn't look to many people, I don't think, like that they were going to win. I mean, there are very few people that were giving them much of a chance, and and they put it on Central Florida, and we're like, I've been saying this really since they named him head coach. I was like, Brent Keys, he is the man. Like, he will be a major head coach. And a lot of people were just like, well, who's that? And it's like, you're about to find out. Well, last Saturday, they found out.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
I
we
think
didn't
that Tech
we
team,
didn't make a prediction or anything, but I had $150 on Georgia Tech and won about 500. I mean, say
and
what you want.
that's an interesting team. And I think that right now, if you're Clemson, what you don't want in the ACC are interesting teams. Um, And so I mean, and I know, and maybe we're bad, maybe we're just negative people because we can end up, I mean, really getting down on the side. But I'm telling you right now, until Clemson gives me something to get up about, I'm just going to have to be down, I guess. And I say that, I mean, I honestly don't, I'm not worried about who wins this game. I mean, I just hope it's a good game. But it's just, in the context, it's so interesting. Clemson has a lot riding on this game. They just
Yeah.
really do. And I mean, and I think that I think it's a big opportunity, or it's a big risk. It's going to be something to see. And like we've said, Klubnik is going to really have to, he's really going to have to be consistent. They cannot turn the ball over today. And their defense is going to have to find somebody up front that's going to be able to stop the run. And they're going to have to affect Beck in some way. Somehow they got to make Carson Beck's life hard. Or I think Georgia's going to win this in probably about 14 points.
Yeah, I think I'm also going to take Georgia to win the game. I think Georgia will probably score over 35 points is what I'm guessing. I think they'll score about 35, 38, somewhere around that. And I think Clemson scores about 14 points today. Don't know how, but I think they do. I think it would be a lot better for Clemson to come out, run the ball a lot, establish a run game, control the clock, be a lot closer of a ball game if they did that. I just don't see them doing that. I see them trying to throw the ball to win the game and it costing them. So that's why, I'm saying, it's about 38-14 in my opinion. With that being said, though, I think we're gonna have a good season. Look forward to being back. Um, we'll probably be covering Georgia Tech a lot more, um, and have a few videos out, going on throughout the season. But with that being said, stay locked in, everyone.